Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. And today we are looking at the Bimber Distillery. Today we have Scott from Wonderland Drinks again, who I'm going to pass you over to. Last session, we've spoken with Scott, and again, we've got him on board with another wonderful distillery that he's importing from in the UK. And this time it's Bimber Distillery, a brand new distillery. In whiskey terms, I guess it's years and years old, but in whiskey terms, anything I guess under 10 years is fairly new. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to pass you over to Scott. You can introduce our guest this evening, and I'll start on the chat. I'll let you know the order of the whiskies. Basically going to start with the Apogee, then onto the Ex-Bourbon Oak Cask, then the Re-Charred Oak Cask, and then we're going to move on to the Australian exclusive Cask, Ex-Bourbon, then the Bimber Virgin Oak Cask, and then the Bimber Port Cask. So I'll throw them in to the chat for everybody so you get the right order as Scott introduces our guest. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Craig, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bimber is a distillery that I think has been on the radar of a number of people in Australia for a while now, but certainly one that we were just extremely excited to have the opportunity to work with, which we have now for, time flies when you're having fun. So it's been over a year now, but yeah, we obviously it's still under the radar in Australia, and I guess our mission is to put it squarely on the radar of people in Australia for many reasons. But mostly we like the liquid to do the talking. And I think you'll find tonight that this is a distillery that deserves all its dues and some. So it's not about me talking tonight, and certainly I'd just like to thank Matt for firstly getting up early this morning. It's always the time difference between the UK and Australia is always a bit painful once daylight savings kicks in here, and it's difficult for our guests. They have to get up early in the morning to literally roll out of bed almost to come and kindly walk us through some whiskies. Matt wears a number of hats. Bimber is so much more than just a little distillery in London. It's got this incredible, there's an incredible lot of work going on around Bimber, and I was fortunate enough recently to be over there and to meet with Matt and to talk with Matt and Dariusz and all the team there about what's happening now and into the future, because there's so much. There's a new distillery by the name of Dunfale coming into the fold up in Scotland. I think Bimber's looking to expand its own footprint in London. And Matt, I wouldn't even like to guess at the moment how many hats you're wearing, but I know that it must be quite considerable. So without further ado, thank you, and I'll let you introduce us to the first whiskey and give us a bit of background with how this came about and what Bimber's all about.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. Hi, guys. Good morning from London. I'm Matt Mackay, and yeah, I'll be telling you a little bit about the various hats, as Scott says, that I wear, both for our London distillery and our soon-to-be open Scottish distillery, Dunfale. But most importantly, I'll be taking you through these whiskies. So it might be morning for me, but it's definitely later on for you. So let's crack on. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction, but whilst I do that, if you'd like to pour your Apogee, I'll tell you a brief bit about that, and then some background about what Bimber is, what we do, why it's a bit different. So your first whiskey, Apogee, that is the only whiskey of tonight that isn't technically Bimber, and there's a reason for that. We can't make enough of the stuff. We are a small distillery. I'll tell you a bit about why we're a small distillery in terms of the process and how that doesn't really scale up. But equally, more and more people want to try our stuff. We haven't got enough of it, and so we created Apogee in response to that demand. What it is sourced whiskey from the Highlands and Speyside that we have purchased. We have moved it out of Scotland, so it no longer can be termed as Scotch. We have blended it ourselves. And when we have finished it, we've additionally matured it in our Bimber casks. So it comes with a 12-year-old age statement. So you can tell we didn't make it. We've only been running for 7 now. You're going to see a slight rebrand on this bottle next year, primarily because I'm a bit tired of people asking me what this Apogee ICSI is. And I'm like, ICSI? And they're like, yeah, ICSI. And I'm like, that's Roman numerals for 12, you daft plank. But I'm tired of having to explain what it is. So you're going to see a new version just with 12 stuck on it. We thought we were being a bit artistic, but apparently some people are easily confused. As Scott said, apogee means the highest point of something. It also means the furthest away. It's a space term. In effect, it means when a satellite is away from the planet, it's the furthest point away from that planet. So it's reflecting something that is away from what we do. It is distinctive. It's not our whiskey. And in all honesty, it's also the name of one of my favorite 1990s computer game companies who made the likes of Duke Nukem. True story. So whilst you get stuck into the Apogee, I'll tell you a little bit about us. So we were founded in 2015. The name Bimber comes from Poland. It means moonshine. And the reason for that is my boss, the founder of Bimber, Dariusz, his father and grandfather before him were moonshiners. They're from Poland. They were primarily distilling fruit spirits, but in communist era Poland. So at a point where you really, really didn't want to be caught illicit distilling, but for all the reasons that illicit distilling has existed, mainly avoiding tax. But when you are illicit distilling, the equipment that you're using is pretty basic. Small, portable, easy to break down so that, you know, if you need to, you can pack it all up and run off quickly. However, Dariusz's grandfather and father before him passed down some of the knowledge around physically how you distill spirits. And by that, I mean using your human senses, your eyes, your smell, your sense of touch, which we believe in a lot of quarters of the whiskey industry, particularly with the bigger players, has almost entirely been lost. You have distilleries out there now, they have quite a lot of reputation, and rightly so. But if you go to visit them, it's effectively push button for whiskey. You know, a dude comes in, he makes sure that there's no red lights on the board, but effectively computerization takes over everything and whiskey just miraculously happens. Bimber is about as far away from that as you can get. So that sense of distilling using your human senses runs throughout the distillery. There's not a single computer in there. There's barely even a piece of paper. The process is quite long-winded. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate whiskey of a style that was pretty much conducted in the UK 100 years ago. So what I mean by that is week-long ferment, so 168-hour ferment, not rushing it. We do that in custom-made open-top fermenters that we built ourselves. So what's happening there is the ferment, the wash that we're going to use to fortify into the spirit is on the yeast. That happens for 4 days, but then after that, wild yeast enters those washbacks and combines with the bacteria that's held in the wood and causes a secondary fermentation, what's known as a malolactic fermentation. We leave that for 7 days, so 168 hours, and it develops a really, really fruity character. And the reason that we do that is we fundamentally believe that distillation is simply a reinforcement of the properties that you've developed during fermentation. So rather than trying to rush that as quickly as possible for volume, we try to get the greatest quality we can from that ferment because we believe it makes the best whiskey. In terms of distilling, we operate 2 1,000-litre alembic pot stills. They've been heavily customized. They work with direct fire. And this is something that I believe you're going to start to see increasingly brought back into distilleries, particularly in Scotland, many of whom abandoned direct fire simply because it was expensive and inefficient compared to steam. Bimber is founded on it. again, those moonshining roots, when you're illicitly distilling in the forest, you're not plugged into the gas mains. You need some heat from somewhere, so fire it is. But the reason why we're using fire is effectively the opposite of the reason that you might use a steam coil to heat your still. When you're heating a still with steam, you're trying to get that boil chamber as consistently heated as possible, an even temperature throughout. We are heating with fire to do the opposite. We want inconsistent heat. We want spots within that bubbling, boiling, starting to condense liquid that are hotter than other places. The reason for that is, the example I always use is cooking a steak. You can water bath a steak and it's perfectly cooked. But unless you put it in the pan afterwards to sear it off, it's a little bit anemic. It doesn't have that final character you're looking for. It doesn't have that char. It doesn't have that sort of sweet, I guess you might call it, a crust on it. Using direct fire in the stills, we are burning in heavier compounds, unspent yeast into the spirit. We are doing the same thing as cooking that steak in the pan. We are creating additional sweetness, additional texture into that spirit. So despite the whiskies, other than Apogee, which I will come back to in a minute, despite our whiskies being young, everything you're going to be trying is going to be at this stage under 5 years of age. They do have quite a lot of intensity of flavor and texture. And we're going to talk through a few of those. Anyway, that is a pretty dense and tons of information introduction. My responsibility, many hats. I'm primarily responsible for Bimber, for the marketing communications. I also do the cask assessment and selection. So if there's ever a Bimber whiskey that's been picked and you don't like it, sorry, that was me. We're building a second distillery in Scotland, which I will tell you about later on today. There, my responsibilities are as the whiskey creator. So wood policy, barrel purchasing, monitoring maturation, and then the vatting and the blending of the liquid when it eventually becomes whiskey. So lots of different hats, but the reason for that is that we are small distillers. There's not a lot of us, so everybody has to wear lots of different hats to make it all happen. Right, I will shut up a little bit and simply ask you how you're getting along with the Apogee. I'd welcome any comments, either if you want to unmute or if you have any comments or questions in the chat box, no problems at all.
Look, I think the Apogee is delicious stuff, Matt. Are you at liberty to tell us the not where it's come from, but the percentages in the blend? Is it a 50-50 or a
it's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm not at liberty to tell you exactly what it is. And SWA in terms of ages and naming things are oh so arsey about it. It is certainly to the point where describing it as a blend of Highland and Speyside single malts is not unreasonable in terms of it being, even is about as much as I'm going to say. Okay. I mean to put it into context for everyone, Bimber makes 50,000 LPA of spirit. That's a barrel a day. If you think about a large distillery, 14 stills, 20 stills, they're probably filling something like 200 to 300 barrels a day. So we are absolutely craft and relatively tiny. And that's why we've created Apogee as something that, because we are sourcing that liquid, but putting our spin on it, we are not constricted by the production and the capacity that we have on site. Everything else you're going to taste after this we've made. But yeah, this is in response to people simply saying, we really like what you do. We really like how you do things. Can we have more? And whiskey is a funny thing that unlike gin, you can't just say, yeah, give me a week, I'll come back and here's more of it. It takes a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great, a fabulous whiskey that I think will get spoken about more and more because, like you say, it's got your signature spin on it as well. It's not just just grabbed some whiskey from somewhere, and it's not just a straight up independent bottling. You've actually gone and it's a true craft blending. The craft and art of blending has been executed here, not just mixing it up and labeling it and putting it out. So
yeah, definitely. We've just started another hat. A new independent bottling line out of our Scottish distillery called Dunfale, and the independent bottling is called Vidava Way. We hope to get some bottles out to you guys in the not too distant future. So that is a new thing where I'm going out and I'm picking casks, and I'm manipulating the ABV of those casks. I'm going to be re-racking some of those casks. But yeah, Apogee is different. Apogee is taking disparate elements, putting them together so that they A, have cohesion, but B, are in a position whereby putting them into Bimber casks, and you'll see shortly if you haven't tasted our whiskey before, our whiskey is pretty concentrated, packed full of sweet, fruity flavors and spice. So when you're creating a blend that you're going to stick into our barrels, it needs to be something that's going to take that on well. You can't just sort of put anything together, throw it in a barrel and hope for the best. That's going to be a disastrous way to run a business. So yeah, this was very much created on the idea that we wanted not just to blend something, we wanted to blend something and then add our fruits and spice on top of it. I do wish we'd saved some of it, and then with every bottle included perhaps a little sample, a little miniature of the pre-Bimber finish on it. I think people would be, I think it would blow their minds how much influence it's actually had on the original liquid. I can only promise you it has. Perhaps in the future we'll look at, particularly when we do tastings, reserving some liquid just to show you how much a sort of secondary maturation in something that's highly extractive, how much is possible from that.
With the barrels that you selected, were they all refill bourbon barrels or were they just a selection on that? Because Bimber's most known.
Yeah, sure. So they would have all been at that point a refill American standard bourbon barrel, 200 liters. So yeah, originally we would have used it first fill bourbon for making the Bimber. But yeah, having done that, disgorged it to make, I think, the expression you're going to try next, the Ex-Bourbon casks. So there's a good linkage there. Then at that point, when we refill them again, it's a refill, it's a second fill, but they're all bourbon. So I do love it when I do these tastings and people say, oh yes, I can tell the sherry casks in here. And I tell them, unfortunately, there isn't a single one. This is all purely Ex-Bourbon matured whiskey.
Well, I deserve a bottle for that.
Yeah, it's a prize over there. Well done.
How long are you maturing the second time around for?
Sure. So whenever it comes to secondary maturations, we are always about the right time, not about a specific time. So you might see a future Apogee that has a different amount of maturation time. This one, it was around 7 months. We do have at least a cask or two of this original recipe where we've left it in the cask for 2 years now. So you are going to see in the future different things. You will see, I don't think there'll be a lot of it, but we do have some of this in a sherry cask for people who thought they detected it first time around. We have one that where yes, this time it is a sherry cask. But yeah, we're all about maturing for the right amount of time, i.e. tasting it and going, yeah, this feels good to us. So yeah, this batch about 7 months in the Bimber casks.
All right.
So the ABV it's the lowest thing we've done. And the reason for that is twofold. Bimber ABVs are naturally a bit higher, and that's because we've spent so much effort trying to build texture into that whiskey that diluting it down to a certain point, you start to lose a little bit of that texture. There's a balance where we want to make sure that you can taste that texture. This wasn't made by us, so it has different properties. We feel that 46 is a really good drinking strength. You're going to find some whiskies later on where you might naturally want to add some water to it because it's bloody strong, and that's absolutely fine. But we wanted this to be good to go out the bottle, no matter your whiskey tastes. The 0.3, those of you who know your Scotch whiskey might have noticed that it's the same ABV that what was Distell, now Heineken Distell, so Deanston, Bunnahabhain, Tobermory, they always bottle at 46.3. There's a reason for that. The 0.3 is the maximum allowed variance by the SWA in terms of bottle labeling. So 0.3 degrees either way is where you're allowed to label your whiskey. Why is that? And that's because if you take a whiskey anywhere in the world, depending on the temperature and the pressure, you will find that your ABV measures differently where you are in the world. Yeah, true fact. That maximum difference in ABV is 0.3%. So if you bottle your whiskey at 46.3, no matter where you have it in the world, it will never, ever measure below 46. And that's why people choose 0.3, because A, it's the legal variant, but B, it's the maximum that alcohol will measure based on your temperature and pressure in the world. So we've chosen that percentage because we want a 46% whiskey, but Apogee is, and we do see it as a global brand. So we're aware that it's going to be drunk all over the place. So we add that 0.3 to make sure that everyone gets the same drinking experience, no matter where they are in the world.
Speaking of ABV, as we're moving on to the next one, it does say on the pack 52.2, which I think is actually a typo. Well, that's the Apogee there. But on the next whiskey that we're about to have, the Ex-Bourbon Oak Cask batch 3, the actual ABV is 51.6. So I think it was just a little typo on the thing there, but yeah.
Yeah, I've blurred my screen, so these don't really work very well because they want to focus on me. In fact, it's a disaster. Yes, let's move on. Let's move on, guys. And I can hold you a blurry bottle. So we're now going to move on. Everything we're going to try now, we have crafted ourselves. All of Bimber comes from a single farm in Basingstoke. Basingstoke is about 45 minutes to an hour west of London. We work with a single farm, not because we want to go on the internet and talk about single estate whiskey. It's simply because of how we work. Being a distillery in the middle of London, there is no space. I hate going into the distillery if I've got my car. I can't park anywhere. It's a nightmare. But being an urban distillery, it also means that you have no space for grain storage. A lot of distilleries you'll visit, if you're out in the country in Scotland, you'll see massive silos alongside the distillery. They're used to store grain, be that peated or unpeated. We haven't got the space for that. So we need to work with a partner who's prepared to deliver us grain every single week. And a lot won't. A lot are just not prepared to do that, particularly driving into central London. It's a bit of a mission. The farm that we work with, called Fordham and Allen, not only does their grain provide we think beautiful flavor, the correct amount of extractability, but they're super happy and they love working with us, and they're very amenable to delivering us that grain on a weekly basis, i.e. this is when we need it and it keeps coming in. All of the whiskey you're going to be trying was distilled, was processed with two-row concerto, which is a bit of an industry mainstay over here in the UK. All of the whiskey that we are making now is being distilled with two-row Laureate. And again, that's what's happening over here in the UK, in Scotland, in some place in Ireland, in England. People are moving from concerto. The efficacy of that strain is starting to drop effectively, without going into a biology lesson. You grow the grain off of the previous crop, and eventually after many, many years of doing that, not quite hybridizing it, but of growing and growing and growing, the amount of extractability just starts to drop. So everyone's moving over to Laureate. So all of the whiskey you're going to be trying tonight is two-row concerto. We do not mill our grain. There is no mill in the distillery. We simply crack it open. And yeah, this is kind of a thing for Bimber, that a lot of processes you see in distilleries are designed not for flavor at all. They're designed purely for efficiency. They're designed for yield, to get every last drop that's possible. We work against that. We fundamentally don't believe in it. We believe in getting efficiency where It's possible, but not at the expense of flavor. So we crack our grain because we don't believe in milling it into flour. That does change the profile of the whiskey. It could be something that you might describe in some cases as being gristy, floury. And then when it comes to mashing, we only apply 2 waters. So most distilleries will apply 3 waters, an initial strike water to set the temperature, to gelatify the kernel. 2 waters of increasing temperature, the last one really sort of, pushing up into the high degrees to get the maximum amount of fermentable extract from that. We don't do that, we just do it twice. So again, everything about Bimber is about getting the right level of flavor and extract rather than getting the maximum yield. So onto the whiskey. This whiskey is one of our vattings, our marriages. It's a release of 5,000 bottles. It's the biggest release that we've done to date. It's going to be roughly 4 years old. We don't yet put age statements on our bottles. We will be moving over to putting distillation dates, months and years, and then bottling dates, i.e. like old Balblair bottles. If you can do a bit of maths, you'll work out what it is. But we don't feel at this stage that the market is ready for, big announcements of, oh, this is 4 years old, this is 5 years old. We think there's still a lot of people in the industry who believe that, the bigger the number, the better it is. And I'm sure you guys already know, being seasoned veteran drinkers, that simply isn't the case. But I can tell you this one is 4 and a bit years old. Whenever we do a vatting, a marriage of casks, we always rectify the ABV. You're going to be drinking some cask strength whiskey shortly. This one, we've reduced the ABV. The simple reason being that whenever you blend casks together, it would be simply incredible if you happen to dump 20 casks into a vat and somehow their average ABV was perfect. It would be a complete miracle. I'm sure it's happened once. The chances of it are pretty slim. So when we combine casks, we then take down the ABV so that the combination of those casks that we've selected, we feel really enhances the whole experience. Aroma, flavor, mouthfeel, finish, the whole thing. We're looking at that and we're trying to find a point that we feel happy with. Jason's asked a question about mashing. No, we don't mash twice. We mash once. But when you mash, you would normally apply your strike water and then 2 sparges. We just apply strike water and 1 sparge, so 2 waters. So we're not doing. You're almost implying a reiterated mash. When I did a home brew a couple of months ago, when I made an 11% stout and had to reiterate my mash, so mash twice. So you make your mash, and then you mash into the mash, and that was immensely messy. And I'm amazed my fermenter didn't end up over the ceiling, but there's quite a bit of it on the floor when I came home. Massively high ABV. No, we're not doing that. We are simply only using the sparge water volume that we need to get the amount of extract. We're not pushing through a final 94-degree water volume to eke out every last bit of it. Yeah, you can drink it how you like, guys. Ice, I don't mind. Definitely all these whiskies, I would personally try them as they come and then try adding a few drops of water to them, particularly as we move on to some of the cask strength bottlings. So yeah, this is the biggest release we've done to date. We're pretty famous for doing single cask releases. It's what a lot of real whiskey geeks want. They want the uniqueness that one barrel alone can provide compared to another barrel, even if they're exactly the same type. However, we are aware that if you only do releases of 400 bottles, your market sort of base, it can be pretty small. So as a distillery, which is growing but is still pretty small, we're trying to achieve a balance between doing the single cask releases, which everyone always wants and everyone always desires, and then these bigger releases where we have the opportunity to reach out with Scott to get some bottles across to Australia, where we're in a better position if someone says, hey, I want to try Bimber, they've actually a chance to getting it. A lot of our single cask releases, they sell out in about 60 seconds. That's great. That's really flattering. Wow, thank you so much. But equally, there's a happy medium there. You know, we want people, when we're talking to them about Bimber and saying, hey, yeah, we think we're really proud of what we're doing here. And they say, oh, can I try anything? And then they come to the website and there's nothing on there to buy. That's a disappointing situation to be in. So as we go forward and as we grow, we really want to try to achieve a nice balance between the things that people are asking us for and then having some expressions similar to this. You know, this is not a core release, but in terms of the flavor profiles, that's kind of where we're at. You know, we're there with big fruits, big fat texture, which you're definitely going to see in some of the single cask releases even more, and then quite a lot of extractive cask spice. And we want people to try that.
Can I just
you know, there's not a lot of people who go on.
Can I just ask a question quickly? The grain is malted. Is the grain malted?
Yep.
Okay, it is malted.
Yeah.
So it's malted with your farmer mates who then bring it in, or does it come in for you to?
No, it travels to a place called Warminster Malting, which is a few miles over west from the farm in Bristol. It's the oldest malting house in the UK, and they have a malting floor that they dedicate just to Bimber. So it travels over there.
Okay.
It becomes malted, and then it comes back all the way over via the farmer to the distillery.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, mate. Sorry about that. We got a bit confused.
That's right. No problems.
You had a single release in Singapore. Maison de Whisky had a barrel. So you're doing sort of releases all around the world as well, not just sort of hometown stuff?
Yep. So we're in 30 markets now. Our primary market is the UK and Europe, but the clamour for our whiskey is high enough that, yeah, we're trying to get as much as we can out into other markets. We are a global distillery. I'm the only native Londoner working for the distillery. Everyone else is from around the world. It's sort of culturally who we're part of, and we do feel that whiskey is one big world now. So rather than just releasing English whiskey into England, and that market is pretty crowded now, we are seeing quite a lot of demand across the world, including in Australia, for what we're doing. And yeah, we're trying our best to sate that demand. I don't think we will. I don't think we've got enough of it. But yeah, every year we're putting aside some releases, and we're doing some special exclusive releases for those markets, one of which you're going to be trying quite shortly.
Cool, thanks.
Right.
So what's your aim for
Are we ready to?
What's your aim for the age
Go on,
statement?
Craig.
What's your aim for the age statements then? So what are you sort of looking at? What do you want to start hitting at and putting out as a core release? Is there a plan for that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Craig. We haven't made a decision. 10 maybe. 10 feels like double digits feels like an okay number to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we might not do the occasional release when you know, we want to just show something off. But in terms of something where you're like, here it is, here's a big number, and we're sticking to it. Yeah, 10 feels about right to me. We really want people to build a foundation of people who know and respect and enjoy our whiskey, rather than those who are razzle-dazzled by a number. We just believe those days are over. And the way that not just us, but particularly New World and English distillers are making whiskey is completely different to the way that whiskey has traditionally been made, where you're like, well, it needs to be 10 or 12 before it's worth anything.
Yeah.
We are making whiskey which, because of its properties, does develop a lot quicker. You know, if you give this to someone blind, the whiskey you're drinking, and say, how old do you think it is? Very few people would say, oh, that's clearly a 4-year-old whiskey. 4-year-old whiskey generally has an immense amount of bready yeastiness. It's simply because that yeast hasn't dropped out. A, down to the process, B, down to the climactic conditions where it's been matured. It simply takes longer. And that's no bad thing. Our distillery in Scotland We might not release any whiskey from there until it's 4, maybe even 5. It's going to take a bit longer because of the climate. But here, and even some other countries, you mentioned Catalan briefly earlier, you look at what they put out that's just 5, 6 years old, and the amount of impact and flavor they've got into it's incredible. So I do believe that the conversation around age statements is changing, and I believe it has to change. And equally, if you look at where pricing is going of anything that is age statemented, unless you're a millionaire or you've got very deep pockets, some of these big age statements at the minute you can almost forget about. So yeah, we are flavor first. That's what we're all about. Yes, I am a Londoner called Mackay. Originally, way back when, my family were from Caithness in Scotland. I make no such claim. I was born and raised about 20 minutes from where I'm sat here now. But it is quite useful when I'm working with our Scottish distillery that people read my emails and go, he's one of us, and then they speak to me on the phone and go, not really. Play the game.
Yep.
Right, should we move on, guys? Should we move on?
Yes.
So our next dram, I believe, is the it's I'm going to describe it as an old favorite, Re-Charred oak casks. There you go. Can't see anything. This was our second release. So the first release we did, cunningly named Bimber the First, was a vatting of 5 PX sherry casks. This release you're trying now is starting to get a little bit rare. There's not a lot of it around. In my view, this is the release that put Bimber on the map. This is the one. And it was a real risk for us. We took some casks that were a little bit knackered, and we opened them up, we stripped them out, we effectively decharred them, we stripped out everything that was in them. We then took a flamethrower to them and recharred them, and then we put some spirit into it. And yeah, this is a favorite release for many a whiskey fan, even to date. And yeah, I do believe it puts us on the map. It's a release of 5,000 bottles again. So going back to our beginning, the ABV we don't stick on the tube, which is an interesting change, but it is 51.9. And yeah, it's a little spin. It's the same recipe, the same sort of spec as the ex-bourbon casks you've had. But here, those ex-bourbon casks have been decharred and then recharred by hand by us. And so it does result in something that's a little bit unique. We don't have any of these casks left, but I always have a lot of demand. People saying, when you're going to do more? I'm pretty sure we'll do something along these lines again, just so popular. This one is young. This one is free and a bit-year-old whiskey. So we've gone back a little bit, but equally, the fact that you've decharred these casks means that there is more exposed wood and more ability for the spirit to penetrate the wood, both in terms of maturation, which I always love the story about the distiller who hated the angel share, just thought it was a waste of spirit that it just evaporates. So wrapped up their casks in, I don't know whether you call it saran wrap or cling film, but plastic wrap them up to prevent the angel share. Came back 2 years later, opened up the casks and was baffled to find that it was still crystal clear and still tasted like new make spirit. Hadn't appreciated that maturation is the angel share, the oxygenation, the release of spirit into the air. That is what maturation is. And so here you have a whiskey that, despite it being about a year younger than the one we've just tried, to my taste, it doesn't taste immeasurably less mature, because the treatment, the char that we've applied to the wood has allowed more spirit into it to interact with the charcoal, which is filtering, to interact with the cask spice, the lignins, and also to allow more penetration through to oxygenate into the angel share.
Yeah, you get a lot more of those sort of sugars and the caramels sort of coming through from on this one.
With sugar, yeah, exactly, yeah,
love it.
As I said, this was many people's first ever taste of Bimber. The first release was only 1,000 bottles, and a lot of people, unsurprisingly, still have them. They sit on the shelf and people pray at them and light candles, like everyone does with fancy whiskey. But this one was, this was £60, and so people opened it and said, "Wow, this is what Bimber are doing," and this is 3 years, 5 months old, something like that. And yeah, right time, right place, right team, and the right way to make whiskey. Yeah, I think all of those things happened, and 3 years later, yeah, we're in a good position now. Lots of exciting things happening.
One thing that I've always, I've been finding, Matt, is that there's a really strong DNA in the Bimber whiskies that I find travels through all of them, through all the expressions. The spirit DNA is something that is just, it's a really definitive character that I'm finding in all the whiskies, even the Apogee, to be honest. That the finishing in the Bimber casks, for me,
yeah, it's there, right? You do get the fruit and spice.
Yeah, absolutely, and that for me has been one of the things that has really sung loudly to me about the Bimber distillery and the people who are working in it, is that it's not oh, well, we lucked out on this one, geez, that was a good barrel, lucky for that, and this barrel didn't really work out so well, we'll bottle it anyway. But there's distilleries that I know of where barrel to barrel you can have a great experience or a really horrible experience, but with Bimber I've just found that DNA in the spirit and the process that is being followed, not rushing things, it's just tells me that the future is bright.
Oh, thank you, Scott.
Matt. Just out of interest, Clive and I are in the wine industry over here in WA. With your barrels, when you re-char them, do you actually shave them back and then re-char them, or do you just basically get in there and go crazy with the?
No, we shave them back. So yeah, your primary decision when you're doing that is going to be whether you're working with the grain or against the grain. And that is a fundamental decision when you're shaving a cask back, which way you're doing it. The whiskey industry has even almost sort of defined that process. If you shave against the grain, then you'd probably call it an STR cask. And if you shave with the grain, you'd call it a new era of oak cask. I don't really understand that term. It's a bit wanky if you ask me, but there is a fundamental difference when you're pushing, removing that residual char to go at it again and pushing the wood so it's planed, or whether you go against it. So obviously it's going to be a bit more jagged. You're going to get a lot more liquid to wood contact, but ours is with the grain.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Cool. Lovely whiskey. Gorgeous.
Thank you so much.
Something that I found out when I was there at the distillery, Matt, that I thought, wow, that's a really incredible bit of information that perhaps doesn't get talked about very often, that the washbacks themselves are made of American oak, so that there's an extractive process already happening in the washbacks. And that,
yeah, I wouldn't say extracting, but I would say bacterial.
Yes, yeah. I'll use Darius's words in that. But the idea that there was going to be wood was already working in the process early on in the process. So, rather than cedar, the traditional sort of cedar use of cedar as a washback, as a wooden washback that I've seen around now. Is American oak? Is that being used often in wooden washbacks? Not that I'm aware of. No,
not at all. Yeah, the reason that we've built those washbacks, and yeah, you won't see them anywhere in the world. And if you Google Bimber, they've become a little bit of an iconic site of ours because of their uniqueness. The reason that we've used American oak is not necessarily because we want American oak flavors in the whiskey. That will come from the barrel, and there's more than enough of that going on already. It's simply that because that wood type allows us to lightly toast the inside of the washback enough that it provides a stable home for the bacteria. So what we're trying to do there is, because we're running this long ferment, we want two things. We want wild yeast coming in from the air, and it's all around us. And at some point we should probably do some studies into, well, what types of wild yeast do we particularly have in the distillery compared to the bacteria that lives in the wood. When you're running a steel washback, you are trying to avoid both those things. You're working in a sealed unit. You're working with minimal amount of oxygen ingress to avoid the yeast. And then between washes, you're probably using what's called CIP, cleaning in place, whereby you're blasting it with caustic soda so that it's completely, utterly scoured for the next wash. When we finish a wash, we've got a little karcher, a little hose, and we just go bzzz, clean. That's it. We want that bacteria to live just within the pores. It's not charred, it's just light, very lightly broken up. So it's the combination between, I guess, you see a lot of companies providing you with stomach tonics, and they always talk about good bacteria rather than bad bacteria. Similar idea. We want the good bacteria to live in those washbacks and then to cause a malolactic, a secondary fermentation with that wild yeast. And that's what happens. I guess you could say it's slightly dirty in terms of spirit making. Bimber's a bit of a juxtaposition. We have, a dirty ferment. When you taste the ferment, it's super fruity to the point where it's actually souring. Distillation initially, direct fire, burning in the compounds is a bit dirty. But then what you have is, as the cat decides to make an appearance, then what you have is stills that have been customized to maximize copper conduct, reflux, stills that, despite being direct fired, are actually quite slow. People think it's going to be really ferocious and it's going to take like 20 minutes. It's 8 to 10 hours to run that distillation. It's slow. And then shell and tube condensers that have been converted, and I'm not going to describe them as internal worm tubs, but they kind of are. We've stripped out all of the tubing, replaced it with copper piping going vertically rather than horizontally. So yeah, we end up with these processes which we believe add texture and flavor into a spirit, but are somewhat dirty. We then work our damnedest to really get the purest cut of that spirit. Speaking of cuts, the common question when people come to the distillery is, well, what are your cut points? And I always say, well, we don't really have any. Well, we do have them, but I can't tell you what they are. I can tell you what they might be. And the person, well, I don't understand that. I say, well, look, there's no clock, there's no computerization, there's no spirit safe. It's up to the distiller who's on duty that day to come and look at the spirit physically with their eyes, smell it, taste it, feel it, and then to decide when they want to make that cut based on their skill as a distiller and the profile that we're looking for. And that varies every day. It's simply a personal human interaction with the spirit. Whereas most distillers be like, right, it's 16 and a half minutes past 10. Now we move over to tails. That is not how we operate. It's that interaction with the spirit to say, right, I can see it, I can smell it, I can feel it, and I can taste it. This is now the point where we're going to move to the next part of the cut. And I've always found that a sort of pretty fascinating, and to me far more, if you want to use the Haggerford craft, than a distillery who simply push button and it kind of just knows when it wants to do that. Right, it's early morning. I'm all rabbling up. Talk about anything at this time of day. If you do an evening one, then I get tired and I don't say as much. Let's move on. So we're going to move into single cask territory now. So your ABVs are going to jump up. All cask strength. Everything you've tasted is natural color until filtered. That probably should have been said from the outset, or you guys already know. So we're going to start off with single cask 191. This was bottled exclusively for the Australian market. Effectively, imagine everything that you've tried so far. So we've tried the Apogee, where you've got a touch of that Bimber influence. Then you've tried the Ex-Bourbon, which has got our influence all over it. Then we've spun it around with a little bit more impact and sweetness and spice with the Re-Charred. Now, they were going to go at it cask strength, natural as it comes, undiluted, unmessed around with, just simply tipped out, barrier filtered and bottled. And yeah, you can see this is what Bimber is like in its most natural presentation in an ex-bourbon cask. Don't be afraid to try it and then splash it with some water. Equally, if you like whiskey at nearly 60% ABV, knock yourself out. It's all good. So at that point, I'll probably ramble on about our Scottish distillery, because why not? Bimber was constructed based around my boss Dariusz's love of distillation, his history of moonshining, but pretty much because a distillery in Scotland by a sort of Polish family living in London was not going to happen 7 years ago. No bloody chance. However, Bimber has been, don't want to be too arrogant about it, but it's been pretty successful. We do have a little bit of a cult reputation, and it's put us in the position whereby founding a distillery, a larger distillery, although not big, in Scotland have become a possibility, in the sense that people know us, they know how we make whiskey, they know our approach to whiskey, and they like what they see in terms of those sticking to time-honored traditional processes. And so Bimber had to happen for our new distillery Dunfale to happen. So Dunfale is based up in Speyside. It's near Forres. Another distillery up near there that you might have heard of is Dallas Dew, closed distillery, latterly a museum. The closest operating distillery to us is Benromac. Up in Speyside, we have converted a completely rundown farmsteading. We now have a distillery that has a maximum operational capacity of 200,000 litres of pure alcohol a year. To put that into context, 4 times the size of Bimber. So it's not big. A lot of distilleries, you're looking at 1 million, maybe up to 10 million litres a year. It's the same size as a distillery such as, if you know your Islay whiskies, Kilchoman. They started at 200,000 litres per year. So it's the same size as Kilchoman was when it started. I think they're now up to 450. They have expanded. You're going to see several things at Dunfale that we've spoken about and that you've tasted here. Long ferment, direct fire on the stills. We are sticking to our guns. That's how we make whiskey. But the spin of it is that we have space. So we're going to have some grain storage. And the reason we're going to have grain storage is because we have built a floor malting facility where we will process 100% of our grain on site ourselves, becoming only the second distillery in Scotland. The other is Springbank to do so. We are quite, I'm the sort of the cast selector person who talks and writes too much. But Dariusz and his team their background is construction and architecture. So we have built this distillery ourselves. The entire distillery build is 14 months. We are nearly done as of last week. So we should be completed by Christmas, and then we should receive sign-off and approval from HMRC, who is the government body for effectively tax and also the spirit licensing. We should be open in Speyside Q1 next year. So distilling and open for visitors. Super, super exciting. And yeah, if any of you guys are ever over in Speyside, either for holiday or whiskey tour, send me an email. And if I'm up there, I'll take you around personally.
I was muted. Matt, why Speyside? Why didn't you do the sort of like the trendy thing of going to Campbelltown or drop across to follow Art and Merkin, or why the basically the building blocks of whiskey rather than the fringe?
Sure. So I think 2 reasons, John. Firstly, it's the area of Scotland that Dariusz fell in love with. So when he visited Scotland and did all the research around whiskey and his learning of whiskey, moving over from distilling fruit spirits to being a whiskey maker, it's the part of Scotland that he fell in love with. We're in an area that just has a microclimate. So even within Speyside, you can be one place and it can be pissing down with rain and cold. And this particular part of Speyside, it's in between the valleys. It's lovely. It's the weather there's virtually always quite nice, which for Scotland I find remarkable, because as much as I love the country, I've been up there many times when it's been disgusting.
We know you're lying.
The other reason is simply the style of whiskey. Regional styles are less of a thing than they used to be. Absolutely. However, Speyside whiskey does have historical underpinnings in being fruit driven. If you look at something like Campbelltown, and there are, you're going to go from 3 distilleries, I think there might be up to 7 in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of work happening over there behind the scenes, some of which you might have heard about, some of which you probably haven't. But Speyside naturally feels like a home for our unpeated whiskey, which will have commonalities with Bimber. The difference that we'll have between Bimber is that we are not looking at using the casks that are quite so active. So the casks that you are trying with Bimber have all been selected for massive levels of extraction and activity. And that works. It gives you really big impact after 3 years. For Dunfale, it's similar, but we want to relax it a little bit. So we're mainly looking at hogsheads rather than first fill American barrels. So still ex-bourbon, but just a little bit more relaxed. So in that sense, we're fitting in with this sort of perception of, well, what is Speyside? Equally, we want people to come visit us. And you can go out somewhere like Ardnamurchan or Knockneen. They're amazing parts of the country, but it's about a 20-minute drive if you just want a pint of milk. We want people to come and see what we're doing. We'll have one of only 2 malting facilities that are 100% of production in the whole of Scotland, and we want people to see that. And equally, I guess it's a little bit of a challenge, right? We're moving into the busiest whiskey making area on the planet, and we're doing something a bit different. And yeah, part of us is just a bit like, yeah, come on, bring it on. We're not here to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. We all love Scotch whiskey. It's what we do when we're not making it ourselves. We drink Scotch whiskey, but equally we believe that we can make some pretty bloody good whiskey amongst the best of them, and so why not sit with them? So yeah, it's a combination of all those things. If you look it up online, go on.
Maybe a little bit different, because top Speyside has always run to sherry. This is their drivers, your Macallans and your Glenallachys and so on. They're sort of like, it's a sherry driven sort of industry. And
some of them, not all of them. I mean, Macallan certainly. Glenallachy is a resurgence distillery for years. You haven't really seen much from it. It's only really Billy Walker who's kind of brought it back to life and focused it on sherry. But you've got 71 distilleries in Speyside, and yeah, Macallan, Glenallachy, Aberlour, yeah, they're sherry forward. But equally, there are many others which don't focus on those type of casks anywhere near as much. We will be looking at using butts. There will be a reasonable amount of sherry coming from Dunfale. Equally, we are looking at a much higher percentage of peated whiskey out of Dunfale than we are producing in London, because we have the ability to A, malt it, and B, make a lot more smoke in an area where people will be less upset.
Yeah, London. Get a bit grumpy.
So that malting make its way down south then as well?
No. Just there's no space for it in London. There's no space even for my car. It's very frustrating. But equally, it very much depends on how you malt it. There are different ways of drying. A lot of distilleries who are doing it as a percentage of their production are, they're either using natural air or quite often air blowers, circulate it around. We are being exceptionally old school about it. And even if we are doing unpeated runs, we are kilning it with anthracite. That is how whiskey used to be made, unpeated. That is how we are making it. There is absolutely no space in London for it. And then when it comes to using fuels like that, or particularly peat, there's just no way environmentally and economically that you're going to be doing that in London. So no, Bimber is Bimber. And a lot of people are saying, oh, are you going to close the distillery? Are you moving up north? Not at all. Bimber is still Bimber. It's got its own plan. We are looking at, once we have finished Dunfail, we're looking at expanding Bimber, potentially moving to a bigger nearby site, just to make a little bit more of it, double capacity. But yeah, Dunfail is its own thing. And because it is out of London, it can do things, yeah, it can do things differently. Historically, not many distilleries were sited in cities. I think the example that springs to head was something like Oban, but even then, you know, it's a seaport town. Not many distilleries are in cities because distilleries, it's not really the fact that it could detonate. That's very unlikely nowadays. But some of these processes, yeah, they just don't make for being a very good neighbor unless you love the smell of barley and peat smoke, which some people do. But even I wouldn't like to live next to a distillery. You want to go in when you're ready for it rather than put your laundry out. And yeah, there's no way these things could be done in London. No way. What do we think about the cask strength ex-bourbon, guys? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Love bourbon cask. I always love. I mean, I'm a bourbon cask lover, and as we all know, you can't hide behind a bourbon cask. And this is as straight up as it gets. Well, I think what age on this is probably around 4 years or something. Was it something like that? Or?
Yeah, this one's going to be around. I think everything. Just looking at the lineup, yeah, everything's going to be about 4-ish. The oldest one that we're going to be trying is going to be the last one, the port cask. That one's going to be almost 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything here is going to be 4-ish.
Yeah.
We're just getting to the point where we're going to have in a few months' time 7-year-old whiskey. Pretty exciting.
Wow.
In my view, the way that we make our whiskey and the barrels that we're selecting are totally suitable for making this young whiskey that's really concentrated, really fruit driven, really vibrant. But we are aware that because it is highly extractive, both the spirit and the cask we're picking, that at some point it's going to get too much, right? You're going to get too much interaction. For me, that's probably going to start to happen around, I think, between 8 and 10 years. For Dariusz, he might have a different idea. I think he certainly hopes that it's going to be longer. But for my palate, you know, having tasted things that are now 6.5, I think sort of 8 to 10, it's going to start to get quite woody. So we're aware of that. And what we're doing is we already have a refill cask program. So whenever we're emptying a barrel, we're refilling it. Refill casks, they might take a little bit longer to get ready. You know, you're not going to be seeing those making 4-year-old or even 5-year-old whiskey, but those are going to be good for 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 up. They'll be absolutely fine. So yeah, we're always thinking about the longer plan. Where are the bourbon casks sourced? They are primarily sourced from Kelvin Cooperage. We are somewhat agnostic in terms of the bourbon distillery. Lots of them are Woodford Reserve. Some of them are from Heaven Hill. We don't really mind. What we mind about with any cask is its history. So where has it been? How old is it? What was it filled with? But particularly, what was the purpose of that fill? You know, if you're just saying this was particularly in sherry, yeah, we just seasoned it with sherry and then we tipped that sherry out to become vinegar. We don't want that. So we want to know the history of that cask, where it's been, how it's been treated, and what it was used to mature. And then we're going to, when it comes to the distillery, check the integrity of it. We have repeatedly sent casks back. If they're not good enough, we're not going to use them. If you look at some big distillery groups, naming no names, they pretty much fill into anything because they're operating at such scale that it doesn't really matter. So they have casks that, you know, they sell on to the independent market that by the time they reach independence, they've pissed out. They're completely empty. People are like, well, why? You know, why don't they check all of them? And the answer is they're too big. You know, when you're dealing with companies that large, they'll probably, even when they're making a blend, they'll taste one cask at the end of a parcel, one at the beginning, and then just select all the way through. We are a small distillery. We can't do that. You know, a cask that is wrong, doesn't lend itself to our flavors. It lacks integrity and loses spirit. That's massive, absolutely massive for us. We're not a huge global conglomerate that fills 4,000 casks a day across 20 distilleries. We're one distillery and we fill one cask a day, so it's got to be good. Equally, there are times, not in recent memory, because whiskey is a learning lesson, and we're all whiskey enthusiasts in different ways, but we're the first to admit that learning is lifelong. When we get something that's wrong, we do not bottle it. We had one cask. It was described on the manifest as ex-bourbon, and this was an early fill, so we just filled it. And we wished we'd checked it because it absolutely wasn't an ex-bourbon. We don't know what it was. It tasted and smelt like Underberg or Jägermeister or some type of herbal spirit. Disaster. Undrinkable, tipped it. And that's quite a lot of money for us, but there's no way we're bottling something that's just shite. No way. But it was a learning lesson. Check every cask, make sure you're happy with it before you put your precious liquid, particularly if you're doing a finish, because at that point you're taking whiskey that you could sell now and you're manipulating it further, which is always a risk when you've got, this is good, the market will buy this, let's put it into another barrel. Okay, make sure that that's going to be good still, otherwise you're throwing money away. So yeah, we are agnostic about which distilleries we take wood from, but we are fastidious about what it was used for and the quality of it before we put any of our spirit or re-rack any whiskey into it. Right, what is it? 10 past 9 here. It's the start of my day. Let's move on. Virgin cask. So we've sort of been skirting around the edges of what you're going to be drinking now. We've had the Re-Charred, we've had the bourbon barrel. Now this is, I would describe this as Bimber sort of turned up to 11. Cask strength in a virgin cask, which up until working for this distillery was not my preferred wood type at all. But I think some of the new distilleries, their spirits just are really working because they're not leaving it too long. So this is going to be a youngie. This is going to be less than 4 years old. But there's no way anyone is leaving spirit in this type of cask with this profile for too long. It's going to be too much. The virgin casks are pretty popular. Again, it's going to come from Kelvin cooperage. I couldn't tell you particularly where this was coopered, but yeah, our bourbon comes from Kelvin. Our sherry and port comes from a combination of bodegas in Spain. Although the sort of the traditional sherry triangle, as everyone talks about, is just about to change. The whole world of sherry, I'm not going to lecture you now, but the whole world of sherry is going to massively change over the next 12 months and onwards. Yeah, the virgin oaks, we are obviously refilling afterwards. You do see some controversial labeling when you see people, we're not going to do this. I've seen some refill virgin cask. Don't think I understand that. Yeah, I couldn't tell you exactly where it was coopered, but Kelvin is our main supplier to get things over into the UK.
Did you just say refilled virgin oak cask?
Yeah, I saw one of those a couple of weekends ago where one of our fellow English producers had a bottle that was labeled refill virgin.
Right, okay. I'm sure there's lots of people who would love to be refilled virgins, but
that's it, born again.
Exactly, there we go.
Born again. Yeah, I raised an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Why is the world of sherry changing? I'm not gonna, this is like a whole hour's worth. Effectively, they are opening up the areas within the DO of sherry, of Spanish sherry, that can be called sherry. And in doing so, they're allowing several different grapes. Previously, you were working primarily with the Palomino grape, but then also Muscat and PX. There are now going to be more grape varieties available, which are still, they're being used now, but they will be able to be termed as DO, a DO sherry. And that means that invariably those casks are going to start to be used for the whiskey industry as well. So I don't know when, but that's coming down. You're welcome, Jason. Yeah, changes to rules, changes everything.
Yeah, I love
So
the
yeah,
name.
these virgin casks are pretty popular. We don't have loads of them, but they are cask types that we do dig into. So we've always got some maturing, some on the go, and then when we empty them to make a release like this, we'll get a few more in. They just are quite popular with people who like their Bimber to be, yeah, sort of a little bit more full-throated, all of the flavor, all of the spice.
Once again, you know, so drinkable at the high ABV, which is dangerous in one sense, but
Yeah, for sure.
but yeah, utterly delicious.
Thank you.
With this last one, Craig, I can't remember what the cask number was with this. Do you know what the cask number was? Because there was, I think, 4 casks, port casks released at the same time, I think, was it? 39, 40, 41.
I think it's
Oh,
39.
the port one, 39, 43, and 44.
Okay, 41. Yeah.
I was testing my memory there, Scott.
Yeah.
So what we did a while ago, I will start. You don't have to move on to it yet, but I'm watching the clock, and I'll start to tell you about the port cask because there's a story. The original plan for our releases was to release the Ex-Bourbon, PX Sherry, Virgin Cask, and Port as single casks. And if you see them online, they've all got a different coloured tube. They look quite smart. And yeah, that happened, except for the port cask, the one in the blue tube, which you're going to be either trying now or trying next. I'll introduce it. And we tasted everything, and we're like, this is all great. But the port cask wasn't. It just tasted like port. It just didn't have the same pickup that all of these whiskies that we're talking about this lovely integration between cask and spirit, whereby you can always taste the Bimber DNA. The cask influences, you know, it's there and it's punchy, and the port cask just didn't have it, and we couldn't understand it. And so we waited. We tried it again, and we're like, this is not maturing. This is not happening, which scientifically is not really possible. It has to mature. So we opened it up, and we tipped out the liquid, and we immediately discovered why. And what had happened, learning point for us, is that the port wine had formed a thick, gloopy residue, just sort of unspent tannic compounds all the way around the crows of the barrel. So if you imagine the barrel, it's almost got like this gunk, this port wine gunk all the way around, forming a barrier between the whiskey that was in there and the wood. And so the maturation had just slowed down to an absolute crawl. So I'm glad I wasn't in the distillery on the day that we fixed it, because one of our team pretty much climbed in with a scrubbing brush, scrubbed it all off. Horrible, horrible job. And we then de-charred, re-charred it. After having done that, we put the port whiskey, which we'd moved to an IBC, airtight IBC, so no oxygen contact. We put it all back in, and we crossed our fingers. And yeah, we tasted it about 8 weeks later, and we're like, wow, immediately we can see the maturation's back on, it's happening again. But we wanted to release it when it's ready. And so effectively it came out 18 months after its initial slot, after we were going to release it, because we needed to fix those casks. And yeah, just a learning point that when you get something like a thick, heavy wine, it can get quite gloopy and quite stuck to the inside of the barrels. So that's going to be the last whiskey of tonight. It's certainly the richest one. It is pretty good for this time of the year. It is a ruby port, so a younger matured port. We will be having some tawny port coming down the pipe as we move into the future. So in terms of that future, our primary concern is getting Dunfermline finished in Scotland, but we're nearly there. Then we're looking at what we might do with Bimber, bearing in mind the bubbling demand for what we have. And yeah, we're going to be looking for a new location. everything in London. And if you guys are ever in London, please do come and visit us. It's an amazing distillery experience where you'll walk through an industrial estate and go, really? Is there a distillery here? And then when you get there, it is a little mecca. Craig's got one of the images just behind him on his screen there, and that is what it looks like. It's a little distilling mecca in the middle of an industrial site, but it's full. And so whenever we need to do anything, it's about an hour of just moving things around. It's like Tetris. And although people love visiting us because it's very real, it really is a real distillery. And you know, you get a lot of experiences where it's either behind glass, or you can't take photos, you can't see this and you can't see that, and we think that's rubbish. So you can see everything. It's not very conducive to a visitor experience. It's just too small. So yeah, Bimber is looking at a relocation. It absolutely will not move out of London. A, because we all live there. B, because it's part of who we are. And C, because the bottles say single malt London whiskey on them, so we can't. Ideally, it will remain where we are in that area. We have access to the carpenters, to Dariusz's construction and architecture firm. They are our coopers. They're the people who, when I talk about opening up a port barrel and seeing what's going on, they're the guys who do that. They know wood, they understand it. So we have a group of three people. They built the washbacks. They're building the washbacks for Dunfale. So we don't really want to move too far from those guys because they're super useful to have nearby. But equally, we need space, and we need space for three things. We need space to put in bigger stills. And people say, well, you've got enough space the footprint's not that big. You could put a bigger still in where you are. We could, but that's not how distilling works. When you put in a bigger still, you need bigger washbacks, or you need more washbacks. Every part of the process, if you expand, needs to expand. Otherwise, you haven't expanded at all. You've just got a bigger vessel to put the same amount of liquid into. So we need bigger stills, one of which we've already got, because we thought we were going to be moving sooner than we are. But then a funny thing called COVID happened, and that was the end of that. We'll need more washbacks. We're not going to put bigger ones in. We're going to keep with the design that we've got. They're absolutely perfect. They're 3,000 litre capacity filled to 2,000. So there's 7 of them. We want to put in 14. That's a lot of space. And then the mash tun. It's currently 1/2 ton. So to double up, we need a 1 ton capacity. So we need the space for all of that, not just for bigger stills, for all of the plant, for all of the grain that's not stored for long, but you've still got to store all this stuff, for all of the packaging. If you're making twice as much whiskey, you need twice as much boxes, twice as many tubes, twice as many corks. It's actually quite complicated. Then we need space for the casks, and space in London for anything is a nightmare. Not all of our casks are stored on site, only the ones that either we're emptying, filling, or manipulating. The rest are in the north of London, but it would be nice to have more on site so that we could actively manipulate more at once. And finally, we need more space for that visitor experience that I described, so that people can still see a real distillery, and we're not hiding any, it's warts and all, but just so that we're not taking a group round and saying, watch your backs, hold on, wait, just so it feels a little bit more natural, and that the distillers, they're not a meter away from the tour group, they can still do their job. So I think that's going to be, that's next on the list. And I think we're going to start looking at that next year, alongside all the things that we're doing. So the whiskey's starting to get a bit older. We don't just release 3-year-old whiskey. Hopefully from the selection you've had today, you can see that as it gets older, that's what we release. So when it gets to 4, we'll give you a 4. When it gets to 5, Scott's going to get some 5, I'm pretty sure, coming in 2023. 6, and so on. So as we discover what it tastes like when it gets older, so will you guys. And that's what we see as the journey, not just going, wow, this is pretty good at 3.5. Let's just do that. That's not what it's about. We want to know what Bimber tastes like at 10 and 12, and we want you guys to know what it tastes like at 10 and 12 as well. Feedback is always very welcome. So yeah, I know I've rambled on a lot. I'm using all of my it's probably just a coffee actually, rather than the dram. But yeah, if you've enjoyed what we do and are interested to learn more, then do get in touch with Scott. If you have any questions, you can either put them through him, or you'll find me on the internet in various places. I go by the moniker Verdramble, which stems from my little whiskey website where I don't talk about it. I write at length about it. But yeah, we always welcome any feedback on what we're doing or any questions. We're completely open. And so, yeah, at that point, I'll open the floor to any final questions. But thank you all ever so much for spending the time and enjoying the drams with me, Craig and Scott today. It's been a real pleasure, despite the quite interesting time difference.
Thanks, Matt. Feel free to ask some questions, folks.
Yeah, I was going to ask from a wine industry perspective, do whiskey producers use steam? Do they use steam to steam their barrels in between fills? Like we do, we use steam and hot water and high pressure.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It depends what they want to achieve. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes you'll receive casks that have been steamed. We are a bit picky about it. We do not. We don't want them to be steamed. We want them still with a litre or two of that precursor liquid in, for various reasons. It's not because, we want to try and get 2 litres of wine into a whiskey. It's like putting a drop into a swimming pool. It's not going to have any effect, but it keeps that wood moist, and it keeps the cask ready for us, ready to absorb all of that whiskey. So we'd rather not, but a lot of distilleries do that. But yeah, we're more concerned about the moisture levels. It does vary. Some are going to take it in and immediately STR it, so shave, toast, re-char. Others are, they might even steam it themselves. Some people are playing around with fungicides and sulfur, and I really wish that they wouldn't, because it's a horrible taint. All sorts of different processes.
Well, we've got to ask the question, are we going to be able to purchase the 6 whiskies here, or what's the story in regards to access to that virgin oak cask is absolutely delicious, and the Re-Charred oak was as well, but it's not on the website. So
right now, the casks are available at the Apogee, the Ex-Bourbon, and the Australian exclusive. We did have the port here, but we're waiting for... we're just waiting to see what happens next year, what we can get in. Because the distillery have struggled, obviously size-wise, etc., and Scott's trying to get as much over as they possibly can. When it gets here, it sells out extremely quickly because it's very, very small amounts. So right now we can source through other channels. We can source the Re-Charred for you. So I do have a couple of places that if you are interested, just email us and we can get you the Re-Charred. I don't have a price for you on that, but everything else, so the virgin oak and the port cask aren't going to be here at the moment. So, but I know Scott is chasing up what he can from the distillery, and we should see more and more. What this tasting will do as well is that when things do come in, we'll get in touch with you first and say, well, this has come in. You might have tasted it, you might have not, you might have had a good experience. Do you want to buy a bottle? And you kind of get first shot at getting a bottle of it, because it is so limited. But yeah, it is a shame because, like you said, the virgin cask is superb. But like I said, it's just if we manage to get any of it, we'll certainly go out to everybody from this tasting and let you know that it's available.
That's ours. That's ours. That's ours.
That's fine. That's it.
There will be more of it, guys, and if that's what you really want, then let Scott know, and then Scott can come to us and say, this is really, this is what my colleagues, this is what the market wants.
This is what the market.
Do let Scott know. Do let Scott know that you've already earmarked that cask for yourselves.
We've tasted it, and you've just taunted us, man.
Can we put a cask down? Can we put a cask down?
What we've done is what a lot of people don't do, and that's we've actually opened them. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, fortunate for Bimber, their star has risen very high very quickly. Unfortunately, that means that there's been people who are tempted into using it as a tool to gather and flip, which means quite often these bottles don't get opened. They get seen on auction sites and they get seen passing through the internet, but you don't often hear about them. So we were really the idea of tonight was to say, look, we're not going to be able to buy all these, but we certainly want to be able to give you the opportunity to taste some things that that you can't buy for love nor money, rather than they sitting in a collection somewhere gathering dust only to be spoken of in quiet, hushed tones.
I think Scott as well, it comes to the point of what we see a lot now is that something's released in Australia, around the world, and some people come in, they go, I don't know whether to buy it or not because I don't really know it. And then it sort of gets sold out. And then it's not until 2 or 3 months down the track that you go, oh, you taste it in a bar and you think, I wish I'd bought a bottle of that. This is giving you an opportunity now to taste some stuff that you go, see when that's released, I'm getting my hands on a bottle. I know what it's like. I know how good the liquid is. Let's jump into it. So these are kind of all different from the distillery, which we should see some stage or another. And but like Matt said, it's all about what's the most flavoursome, what's the call out for Australia, what they're looking for. We now hope Scott will get our hands on it. I think that Scott should get his hands on filling a barrel of virgin oak for us all. That's what we should do now. Find a barrel, get them to mature it.
It's delicious.
Yeah. I look forward to hopefully being able to introduce people to a little bit of the peated release sometime next year, which I've had the opportunity to taste, and I can tell you that it is stunning. All the expressions of it, Matt, and I'm sure that it's there's a lot of excitement overseas at the moment or in the market about the peated release, but I can guarantee you that the excitement is justified. Anyway, hopefully we'll see some of that.
So the peated release is just to sort of wrap things off is it's a product of yet more Bimber craziness. So other English distilleries have done peated releases, but ours is a bit different. There is nowhere really in England that is peating the malt themselves. It is for various reasons, as I sort of alluded to, what you can and can't do in London. A lot of distilleries have similar issues that they just are unable to do these processes on site. For the peated release, we malted all of the barley ourselves in Dariusz's basement. We then built a kiln ourselves, and then we smoked the barley ourselves, becoming the first English distillery in at least 100 years to do that process, that floor malting, then into peating on site ourselves. That went up onto ballot last week. There's not a lot of it because Bimber's small, and this is 2 to 3 weeks of production a year. But yeah, I was so happy to share it with Scott a few months back. It's what you've tried, guys. It's that bright fruitiness, but then just with a face full of ash, which outside of any work hats, all hats off, that's the sort of whiskey that I personally love to drink. Fruity but punchy with peat. So there's a lot more of that coming down the pipe in the future. So it's possible that you'll see more of it on Australia eventually. Equally, if you're interested in what we do follow Dumfale. I know it's a different distillery, but it's me and Dariusz. It's the same people. It's the same processes, but even more. And yeah, there's going to be more whiskey because of the increase in capacity. There are casks for sale, and we will get bottles out to the market down the line in a few years' time. So yeah, if you like Bimber, then please do keep an eye on it and follow Scott. But if you like Dumfale, keep an eye on that as well, because it's the next level. It's the extension of what we're doing to the next stage. So yeah, thank you for all the positivity and the positive comments. And I'm sorry there isn't more of it to go around. I wish I could wave that magic wand.
That's it. Thanks, Matt. We're going to do a giveaway. We said that if you come on tonight and you stay for the whole tasting, we will give away some whiskey for you. First, what's happening is the mats that you've got on the bottom of the mats, there's a number. I hope everybody's got a number on the bottom of your mat. If everybody can turn it over, and we just keep basically going until you can show me that you've got that mat. So just keep choosing numbers, and some of the people may not be on. If they're not on, they're not involved. You had to be on here tonight for this. So the first number I'm looking for is number 16. I've got a random calculator here. Number
That's us, we got it.
16.
16.
So you've got a
Okay.
bottle of Apogee, or the first
Hey,
one of
that
tonight.
was our favorite. Yeah, awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
There you go. So that's great. Congratulations. I'll just get your name. It's Jason. So I don't.
Sorry.
And what was it? And then the second bottle we're going to go with is number 11.
Oh, Hakan,
Who's got number 11?
Can.
over here, Hakan.
I can. Wonderful.
No, it's not.
Yep. Thanks.
Sorry,
Number
I
11.
was trying to take myself off mute, but it wasn't working. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much.
That's
Appreciate
right.
it.
You've won a bottle of the
Amazing.
port cask.
Oh, amazing. Whew,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
Cheers.
So we've got a bottle sitting around. We didn't sell it, and we thought, right, we're going to give it away to somebody tonight.
Yeah,
And it was for tasting anyway. So but congratulations, you've got a bottle of port cask.
thank
Bimber.
you. It was tempting me on the shelves at Carwyn Cellars. It's still sitting up the top there. I've always gone in there and thought, oh, I should grab that. So I'm
Yeah.
very happy about that. If
Thank you.
everyone else wants it, then they can go down there. Carwyn Cellars up in Melbourne, which is, they have it on the top shelf there.
There you go. still one lucid bottle left in the wild somewhere.
Yeah.
There always is. Yeah, but look, thanks for everybody. Thanks to Matt. Some wealth of knowledge, and obviously, we're really pleased to have him on today, and his time as well. Obviously, sounds precious with all the little things that they've got on. Well, not little things, all the big things they've got going on at the moment. And can't wait to see this new distillery. I am looking to be over in Scotland in September, so hopefully I'll be able to get myself up to some sort of just to even see the site that it's going to be at. And to everybody joining us tonight, great. To Scott, thanks for importing and the hard work you're doing in importing Bimber. And thanks very much for tonight as well. Wonderful. To let everyone know that coming up over the next couple of weeks, because you've been on here, I'll tell you, Lag Distillery is finally here. Lag's first bottlings. You'll get first shot at them. We'll also have a tasting an online tasting. It'll just be 4 whiskies, but we will have Mariella on here just taking us through Lag. That'll be the next tasting that we'll have, probably in January or February. We'll be able to taste that. And a little bit of Macquarie Moor as well with that. Signatory will be coming in as well, which we'll see in February as well in regards to a tasting. And then next year we've got Lakes, we've got Loch Lee, John Campbell's new place is coming in. And then Buffalo Trace, we'll have a nice tasting of Buffalo Trace as well. So lots to look forward to next year. Thanks for everybody that's tuned in this year. It's wonderful to have seen you all on, especially tonight. But thank you very much. And we'll stick around for a few minutes for a chat. But if not, have a wonderful night, and I'm going to stop recording there. So thanks.